Hello and welcome back to another episode of Baka Breakdown with your hosts Troy and Jason. The show where we take our favorite anime scenes, crack them open, take a look inside and see what we can find. This week we're going to be taking a look at Mob Psycho 2. Mob Psycho Season 2. Mob Psycho 100 Season 2? One of those. But we are going to have spoilers. This week we're going to take a look at a fairly innocuous scene on the surface. But as far as character growth, one of the most impactful in this anime for this character, but also that we've seen in quite some time, as Troy mentioned in our main podcast, this is a masterclass in showing and not telling.
おめでとう。先生、おめでとうございます。
おめでとう。
どうも。
誕生日だったらちょうどよかった。今ね、特別なルートから紹介されたいい枕があってね、低反発でぐっすり眠れて定価12万円が。
So in this scene, we have Reigen. He's lost Mob, and he is struggling to kind of pull everything back together because without Mob, he can't take on these jobs of dealing with real spiritual threats. And he's down and out. He goes to his computer. He gets some really, he tries to find some sort of human connection and finds that the only people wishing him happy birthday on this day of his birthday is a bot and his mother telling him how disappointed she is in him. So he goes to the bar to meet his friends. It's interesting because he has an exchange with his friends. He goes outside. The bartender says he didn't even give him any alcohol, but he seems upset. And Reigen goes outside and pukes. And then the show just kind of moves on. And he kind of gets his life together. And on the surface, it just, seems like he was upset. He decided, this was it. We're going to pull things back together. But Troy, you saw something much deeper here.
Yeah, this was a interesting scene that I actually asked if we could break down. And Mob Psycho 102 has so many fantastic scenes, some of the best action scenes I've seen in anime forever, that all deserve their own breakdowns for sure. But this was, like you said, a masterclass in showing rather than telling. When he goes to this bar, he explains to us who else is the patrons. They are losers. They are easily conned and manipulated. They are just things he can use. And they respect him because he listens to their problems and gives them advice. And when he goes to this bar on his birthday, still seeking human connection because one of the only ones he had has now disappeared, he tells them it's his birthday, and they barely notice long enough to start going back into their own problems. And that's when Reigen realizes, and again, doesn't tell us this, shows us this, he's the loser. He's the one who's been conned and manipulated into believing these are his friends, and they're just there to use him. And there's so much beautiful symmetry that Reigen projects his own failings, his own statuses onto other people, and has a hard time when it makes him look into the mirror.
Yeah, so hard, in fact, that he ends up in the back alley puking his guts out because he wasn't drunk. He was just racked with this identity crisis that he was having a really tough time getting a hold of.
Reigen believes that people need him, and this horrific realization that he's been needing them and they're not there for him because he's not that good of a person wrecks his world.
Right. And we don't have we don't have any other main characters in this particular scene. This is literally an introspective of Reigen having to pull together his life. And it seems that he's done this before when he first bought his office. He didn't know what to do with his life. He rented it out and decided, this is what I'm going to do, except I don't know what I'm going to do. And he saw a newspaper article of a psychic and he was like, that's what I'll do. I'll be a psychic. And this time it feels like he had much more drive, or at least much more determination to try and pull his life back together.
Yeah, absolutely. The scene after this when he throws on his coat, gets dressed, throws himself into his work, because that's all he has left now. And if that's all he has left, he's going to make that work. He then, of course, will run into some issues with that as well.
But this backfires on him because we come back to the bar later. And what happens? These people he called his friends, they're not his friends anymore.
Yeah, they literally just throw him to the curb.
Yeah, even the bartender asks him to just leave. Because the first time he goes in there, the bartender's excited to see him and is more than willing to make a drink. The moment they see him as something they can't use, or at least they feel he's been defrauding them, which they'd never exchanged money. He just considered them friends. All of a sudden, now they want nothing to do with him. Kind of shows, again, that reflection of him, that the relationships he was building were shallow.
You know, we see in the first season of Mob Psycho that Reigen obviously cares about Mob. He cares for his well-being. He looks out for him. But what's fascinating is in the first 5 episodes of this season, we see Mob grow so much. And then at this 6th episode, we pull a hard stop and we focus on Reigen's growth. What is he going through? Because Mob has grown beyond him, growing beyond the need for him. And if this relationship is going to continue, Reigen has to catch up. Reigen has to grow too, and it now has to become a give and take relationship rather than just a take relationship, which before they was working for Mob. That was fine with him, but that can't continue no longer. And Reigen literally has to go through these 2 episodes, and especially this bar scene, to get to the point where him and Mob can reassume a friendship and a relationship.
And as far as, I mentioned that this scene seems fairly innocuous. Did you get that feeling as well, as though it was something that they were intending to point out, but they were using in a non-attention-grabbing way? Do you think this was deliberate, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the first time I watched it, I was actually a little bit like, what is happening here? And I actually remember thinking the way he's narrating about these patrons is really odd. They're really calling out loud very clearly what he thinks about these people, which is not something he does a whole lot in the story. And then the second time I watched it and really thought about what's happening in this story and came to the realization that everything he's saying about them is really the truth about him, and that it's exactly what had just happened with Mob when he talked about Mob's friends and how they're using Mob and manipulating Mob. He meant himself. That's how Reigen operates, and that this anime clearly knows that about this character, has full view of who this character is and how he operates, and is using this for a storytelling purpose. It seems so just a random scene of a guy in a bar with a weird over narration, but it serves such an important purpose in his growth.
So do you feel that this scene, or at least this character growth for him, changed him by the end of the anime? Because we don't get any more, at least the webcomic's done. So we're assuming that Mob Psycho 100 is over as far as an overarching story.
Yeah, but I think we get to see the effects of this arc and the changes he goes through. We see him putting effort into Mob for no reason other than to be a supporting friend for Mob. We see it when Mob gets really invested in his marathon. Reigen closes down the business for the day and helps him train because he realizes it's important to Mob. And remember, this all started because he was forcing Mob to quit doing what he wanted to do on a personal level and come into work, because that had to be what's more important. Why would Mob's life be important? And then right after this, we see Mob's life is important too. This business can wait. Let's go through with it. And we see that right all the way up until the final battle, where he's willing to stick his neck out and risk his life to save Mob against forces he has no chance against.
And he did something similar in the first season. Even though he had no idea that he was infused with tremendous power, he was going to put all these, what he called children in their place, or at least people acting like children, for the benefit of Mob, because he felt he was protecting him in almost a parental aspect. But in season 2, it didn't quite feel that way.
Yeah, it really struck me, and actually one of the reasons I found myself drawn to this scene is because it's clear he does care about Mob, especially in the first season. We see that, he cares about this kid. But it's easy to take someone for granted even when you care about them a lot. Everybody does it sometimes. You're used to that person you care about being there, and you kind of forget they're not just there to provide you comfort or help you with dishes or laundry. They're there for their purposes too, and you need to be there for them. That's an easy thing to forget in a day-to-day mundane life.
And sometimes it's really easy to get pushed over the edge to help somebody when your insurance claim is dependent on it.
Reigen is the best character.
He really is. Do you have any final thoughts on this particular scene?
Just that I absolutely love the way he orders the drink, make it double sour, and then goes and vomits. And we see the actions of a man who overdrank, and yet he never had a sip of alcohol. It's fantastic.
Fantastic storytelling, and also the rest of this season was just top notch. In fact, you should see our main anime podcast on this one. This is a good one. And speaking of podcasts, if you like it or if you like this one, we'd love to have you. So why don't you just go ahead and subscribe? And if you like this video, please give us a like. And speaking of our main podcast, this week we are watching, what is it again?
The Promised Neverland.
Right. First season, of course, it just finished airing, and I am looking forward to a horror anime. I haven't seen one in quite some time. If you like this video, please give it a like, and we'd love to have you if you want to subscribe. And we would also love to hear from you as far as what scenes you would like to see broken down. Please leave us a comment down below. With that, Troy, let's go ahead and say goodbye.
Sayonara.
Thanks for listening.